Managing the food supply in medieval castles was a complex and vital task. With no refrigeration or modern preservation techniques, castles had to depend on ingenious methods to keep food fresh for long periods, sometimes even for months or years. The food needed to be stored for over 1,000 people, including knights, servants, and nobles, especially during harsh winters or sieges. Underground cellars and their role. One of the most brilliant aspects of medieval castles was the use of underground cellars. These deep, cool storage spaces were nature's refrigerators. The deeper the cellar, the cooler the temperature. The typical temperature was around 55 degrees Fahrenheit or 13 degrees Celsius, ideal for storing perishable food. The lower levels of the cellar stored milk, fresh meat, and cheese, where the temperature was colder. The mid-levels housed wine, an essential commodity for the nobility, and the upper levels were used for fruits, vegetables, and preserved goods like pickle. The depth of the cellars allowed for careful separation of food types, preserving their freshness for months. These vast underground labyrinths were so complex that servants often got lost, and they would mark their way with chalk marks on the walls. However, underground storage came with its own set of challenges. Rats were a constant threat, often destroying food supplies, and flooding was another significant risk. A castle record mentions the loss of an entire winter's cheese supply to a rat invasion, while another mentions how flooding would sometimes turn a root cellar into an underground pool. Despite these challenges, these cellars were essential for food preservation. The role of salt. In addition to cellars, salt was medieval Europe's most valuable food preservation tool. Salt helped draw moisture out of food and bacteria, preventing spoilage. Castles used up to 5,000 pounds of salt each year to preserve meat, fish, and dairy. Salt merchants became some of the wealthiest traders of the medieval period, sometimes owning fleets of ships. Salt preservation was critical, especially for meats and delicate dairy products. Fine white salt was used for preserving dairy, while coarser salt was used for tougher meats like fish. The famous phrase, "worth their salt," comes from this time, when salt was so valuable that workers were paid in salt or its equivalent in money. Smoking meat and fish. Smoking was another essential preservation technique. Smoking houses outside the castle walls processed up to 200 pounds of meat per day during peak seasons, producing enough smoked meat to last through the winter. Different woods were used for smoking different meats, creating distinct flavors. Oak was used for most meats, applewood for wild boar and venison, and alderwood for fish. The process of smoking could take weeks, and the meats would be stored and hung to dry in the cool air of the smokehouse. Pickling vegetables and fruits. Pickling was another crucial preservation method. Castles often had large pickling vessels that could hold hundreds of pounds of vegetables at once. Vegetables like cabbage, turnips, and even fruits such as lemons and oranges were pickled and stored for the winter. The process provided a source of vitamin C during long, cold months. Castles also employed pickle masters, specialized workers who kept detailed records of each batch, ensuring that the food remained fresh and crunchy. Honey, the sweet preservative. Honey was another essential preservative in the medieval kitchen. Its natural preservatives, high sugar content, acidity, and hydrogen peroxide, made it perfect for preserving fruits, meats, and even fish. Beekeepers maintained hives about a mile away from the castle, ensuring a constant supply of honey. The honey harvested from these hives was used in food preservation and also in medicinal treatments. Different types of honey were used for various purposes, with lighter spring honey used for medicinal purposes and darker autumn honey for food preservation. Castle architecture and food storage. Castle architecture also played a major role in food preservation. The ventilation system in castles was carefully planned to keep food cool during the summer months. Tall, narrow shafts created a vacuum effect, allowing cool air to circulate from the deepest cellars to the highest towers. This allowed servants to escape the heat by spending time in the cooler food storage areas during summer. The kitchen and storage spaces were strategically designed to ensure the proper humidity and temperature for each type of food. Special rooms were built for grain storage, cheese aging, and drying herbs. The importance of proper ventilation was also realized, as each room had its own unique conditions based on the type of food it stored. The castle staff and preservation. Running a castle kitchen was no small task, with a staff of around 50 people managing food preservation. The master cook had the ultimate responsibility, but a dedicated team of preservation experts and apprentices ensured the food was rotated, stored properly, and kept fresh. Apprentices, often starting at a young age, were trained in the art of food preservation. They were taught how to detect spoilage by smell, how to rotate food, and how to prevent noble family members from sneaking food before the winter supply was used up. The seasonal challenges. Each season brought its own challenges for food preservation. Spring was a time for pickling and smoking the last of the winter stores, while summer was focused on processing fresh herbs and vegetables. Autumn was the most hectic time in the kitchen, with teams working round the clock to preserve the summer's harvest. Winter brought a new set of challenges, as the castle's master cook had to carefully calculate how much preserved food to use each week to ensure it lasted through the coldest months. Emergencies and creative solutions. Despite careful planning, food preservation systems often faced emergencies. During the famous Siege of Newcastle in 1216, the castle held out for over 3 months with stored provisions. But when the main cellar flooded, the kitchen staff worked quickly to move tons of food to higher ground, saving most of the food supply. However, the difficulties of keeping food fresh during such crises meant that creative solutions were necessary. When rats chewed through grain storage bags, food was stored in sealed clay pots. When mold ruined an entire season's cheese, the castle staff developed a new method of daily cheese wheel rotation and rubbing with vinegar to prevent spoilage. Looking back, medieval food preservation techniques are surprisingly similar to modern methods we use today. The smoked flavors in ham, the pickled vegetables we eat, and the salt-preserved meats we enjoy all trace their roots to medieval castle kitchens. The ingenuity and resourcefulness of medieval castle workers not only helped them survive, but also contributed to the preservation of food techniques we still value today.